sanctions. This comes at a high cost to the Cuban people. The US imposed harsh sanctions on banks that engage in operations with Cuba. US citizens are still prevented by law to visit Cuba as tourists, a violation of the civil and political rights of even their own citizens. The US continues to support subversive organisations who are publicly encouraged and financed with millions through US aid and secretly through other agencies with the purpose of trying to create domestic opposition to the Cuban Revolution. The blockade is an illegal act. It violates international law and falls in the category of international crimes of genocide. It ignores the principle of the Charter of the United Nations and violates the rights of development of a sovereign state. It also violates the human rights of Cuban people. Last year, the UN General Assembly vote was 187 votes in favour of removing the blockade. Only the United States and Israel voted in favour of keeping it. The United Nations General Assembly vote gave its whip. Lift the blockade on Cuba!
Lift the blockade on Cuba!
Free the Cuban Five!
Free the Cuban Five!
Viva Cuba!
Viva Cuba!
The blockade has a far reach. An example, the European branch of PayPal recently demanded that a German firm remove Havana cigars, rum and other Cuban products from their webpage. Even though there are no restrictions on European companies doing business with Cuba, PayPal confirmed it acted to comply with the policy of the main branch in the US to block trade with Cuba. The blockade hurts health. The recent intensification of sanctions against third party by the US Obama administration has put Cuba's national transplant program into jeopardy. Cuba's national kidney transplant program requires reagents which for years were purchased from the one Lambda company via third countries. Sanctions from Washington have negatively impacted on the acquisition of those vital products. The lives of Cuban people, including children, are under threat. Shame Obama, shame!
Shame Obama, shame!
Shame Obama, shame!
Shame Obama, shame!
We have a message. While you're fixing the world, here's another issue to add to your list. End the blockade on Cuba!
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 Shame Obama, shame!
Shame Obama, shame!
Obama's actions hurt Cuban children! Shame!
Shame! Viva Cuba!